Director of the Office of Sustainability here at Westchester University, and I am very pleased to welcome all of you on Zoom and those of you who are here in person in 255A-B Psych Student Union to this, the 7th presentation in our Spring 2023 Sustainability Research and Practice Seminar. Our office is honored to be able to co-sponsor this series with our colleagues in the Office for Research and Sponsored Programs and the Sustainability Council's Scholarly and Creative Activities Committee. Please remember that we have 5 more presentations in the series this semester. Amy will put a link to the digital version of the program in the chat on this Zoom setup. And for those of you who are here in person, we have hard copies that you are welcome to take with you at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, I would like to hand over the digital platform to our colleague, Professor Cassandra L. Reyes. Take it away.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Hopefully you've had a nice spring break and welcome back to this beautiful weather. I'm going to go ahead and put my PowerPoint on. Share my screen here. Bear with me. Okay, so hopefully you all can see my screen. Can everybody see it okay? I hope. Okay, good. So I just want to give you a little notification. I was at a conference in National Harbor last week, and I brought a virus home with me that's non-COVID. So I apologize in advance if my voice starts reducing itself. A little bit of background. I have what is known as the first animal cruelty elective course in the criminal justice curriculum in the United States. It started in 2010. I created it without a book. I just used basically articles and took some models from social work and psychology and created the course. It's been offered basically every semester, and moving forward, it'll be offered once a year. It's also now a speaking emphasis and an ethics course. So today's presentation, of course, is something fishy about crime, how to teach conservation and sustainability, the use of oceans, seas, and resources for sustainable development in an animal cruelty, criminal justice elective course. So today's agenda, we're going to talk first about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 14, which directly relates to this presentation. Anti-ocean wildlife cruelty laws, acts, and legislation, animal cruelty for profit in a general sense, the crimes against ocean wildlife, some ocean wildlife that are in danger because of the actions of humans, organizations that help protect the ocean wildlife, and how to incorporate all this information into an animal cruelty criminal justice elective. First, with regard to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 14, it states the goal of the interest, which is the goal of the interest of this presentation, which is to conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. As you can see on this infographic, it provides great information about the endangerment of our oceans and some of the impact this has. However, because we are focusing on the animal cruelty course, we're going to focus specifically on factors that, in fact, affect our ocean wildlife. First, we're going to discuss some anti-animal cruelty laws, acts, and legislation that affect these wildlife. I apologize, I'm using my notes because like I said, I brought home something unexpected from my conference. Okay, so these are just selected acts and legislation and laws that affect our ocean wildlife. The first one, the James M. Inhofe National Defense Authorization Act of 2022. Within this act is the Shark Fin Sales Elimination Act. This critical measure prohibits the commercial trade of shark fins and products containing shark fins in the United States. And this was just signed into law on December 22nd of 2022. Next, the Lacey Act was the first enacted in 1900 and significantly amended in 1981. Is the United States' oldest wildlife protection statute. The act combats trafficking and illegally taking of wildlife, fish, or plants. The Food Conservation and Energy Act 2008, which is effective in May 22nd, 2008, amended the Lacey Act by extending the protection of a broader range of plants and plant products at that time. The next one, the Convention in the International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Fauna and Flora, or CITES, is an international agreement signed by 184 parties in 1973. It was designed to ensure that international trade of animals and plants does not threaten their survival in the wild. Now, fauna, of course, is animals, and flora would be the plants. The Endangered Species Act of 1973 provides a framework to conserve and protect endangered and threatened species and their habitats, both domestically and abroad. The purpose of this act is to provide a means whereby the ecosystems upon which endangered species and threatened species depend may be conserved, to provide a program for the conservation of such endangered species and threatened species, and to take such steps as may be appropriate to achieve the purposes of these treaties and conventions set forth by this act. The next one, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, enacted in 1972, established a national policy to prevent marine mammals from declining beyond the point where they ceased to be significant function elements of the ecosystems in which they are a part. And finally, the International Convention for the Regulation of Whaling was signed in 1946, and it is the International Whaling Commission's founding document. The convention includes a legally binding schedule which, amongst other things, sets out to catch limits for commercial and aboriginal subsistence whaling. The schedule is an integral part of the convention, but its provisions, for example, catch limits, may be amended by the commission. In practice, the amendments to the schedule are almost always agreed at the commission's biennial meetings. Next, we're going to be talking about 3 different areas for animal cruelty for profit, and we're going to talk about them more broadly and then more specifically. And those are factory farming, the CITES, which I mentioned, which is Appendix 1 trafficking, and animal tourism. With regard to animal cruelty for profit, and specifically factory farming, as you can see on this graphic, it depicts the number of people who rely on fish as their primary source of protein, how much higher the harvest of fish and the worth of fisheries would be if managed sustainably, how much fisheries contribute to the gross domestic product, how many fisheries are underperforming, and how many people are employed in the fishing industry. If one is familiar with the term factory farming, usually the first things that come to mind are dairy and meat, which would include beef, pork, and poultry, and egg-producing farms. However, when the focus shifts to aquatic farming, fisheries are often the focus. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization, or FAO, of the United Nations in 2020, 177,756.8 thousand tons of aquatic animals were produced worldwide in capture fisheries and agricultural facilities. Of this number, it includes 69,075.5 thousand tons of marine fish, 58,457.7 thousand tons of freshwater fish, 23,901.8 thousand tons of mollusks, which would be oysters, clams, scallops, snails, slugs, squid, and octopi, 17,250.4 thousand tons of crustaceans, which are crabs, lobsters, shrimp, prawn, krill, cray, or crawfish, 7,487.1 thousand tons of diatramous fish, which are fish who travel between the sea and non-saltwater areas during their life cycle, and 1,582.2 thousand tons of miscellaneous aquatic animals. So you can see that these fisheries have affected a lot of sea life and non-oceanic life animals. Looking at the status of fishery resources, according to the FAO in 2022, based on its assessment, The fraction of fishery stocks within biologically sustainable levels decreased to 64.6% in 2019. That is 1.2% lower than in 2017. This fraction was 90% in 1974. So if you think about it, we were at 90% in 1974, and we've already gone down to 64.6% within biologically sustainable levels. In contrast, the percentage of stocks fished that at biologically unsustainable levels has been increasing since the late 1970s, from 10% in 1974 to, of course, 35.4% in 2019, which would balance out what I just mentioned. This calculation treats all fishery stocks equally, regardless of their abundance and catch. Biologically sustainable stocks account for 82.5% of the 2019 landings of assessed stocks monitored by the FAO. Now, moving into the percentages of biologically sustainable and unsustainable fishery stocks, according to the FAO in 2022 and 2019, among the 16 major fishing areas, the Southeast Pacific area, or Area 87, had the highest percentage, 66.7% of the stocks fished at unsustainable levels. The Mediterranean and Black Sea, which is Area 37, had 63.4%. In contrast, the Northeast Pacific, Area 67, Eastern Central Pacific, Area 77, Western Central Pacific, Area 71, and Southwest Pacific, Area 81 had the lowest proportion of anywhere from 13 to 23% of stocks fished at biologically unsustainable levels. So you can see in this Pacific, we had more sustainable stocks compared to other areas that are included in the FAO's major fishing areas. The other areas, vary between 27% and 45% in 2019. So you can see how we're standing with regard to this unsustainable versus sustainable stocks across the world. When we look at the state of the major inland fisheries by region, according to the FAO in 2022, the threat mapping approach permits an evaluation of threats to inland fisheries, food production, and biodiversity at different levels of resolution, from a global level to the level of individual basins or subbasins. The sub-basin disaggregation shows how different parts of a basin may contribute to its overall threat level, and may show that not all parts of the basin are affected in the same way, and thus reveal where the focus of conservation and ecosystems restoration efforts and each part of the basin may support different fisheries and may be subject to different threats. The vulnerability of the fisheries and their socioeconomic characteristics will also vary according to their spatial distribution and will need to be considered. So you can see how at the world level, Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean, Europe, North America, Oceania, and South America's levels all are listed and how they compare with one another. If I speak too fast, please let me know. I lived in New Jersey for a while and that kind of sped up my speaking. I apologize in advance for that. All right, so moving into animal cruelty for profit as regard to CITES, Appendix 1 trafficking. The Appendix 1 under CITES includes species that are threatened with extinction and provides the greatest level of protection, including a prohibition in commercial trade. According to CITES in 2022, the following Appendix 1 aquatic related animals were trafficked. First is the American crocodile. 1,100 of these animals were trafficked. The olive Ridley sea turtle, 111 were trafficked. The hawksbill turtle, 85 were trafficked. The Asian arowana, we had 50 of them. And the leatherback sea turtle, 29 were trafficked. In total, 1,150 of these animals were captive bred or artificially propagated, and 234 were captured from the wild. With regard to what was trafficked, there were 1,100 skins, 149 specimens, 85 derivatives, and 50 live animals. With regard to the exportation of these animals, 1,100 were from Colombia, 149 were from Ghana, 85 were from Panama, and 50 were from Malaysia. With regard to the importation of these animals, 1,000 entered Mexico, 185 entered Spain, 149 entered the United States of America, and 50 entered Japan. So you can see that the United States is involved with the illegal importation of these animals, according to the Apex one, the ones that are most protected under the CITES agreement. Next, we will focus on aquatic animal tourism. Think about your past or your current or your recent endeavors. How many of you have ever visited a coral reef? How about swimming with or watching dolphins, sharks, whales, stingrays, etc.? Well, over 350 million people annually travel to the coral reef coast of the world. Over 70 countries and territories have million-dollar reefs that generate over $1 million in tourism spending annually. Now, there have been some discussions about whether a coral reef is actually considered an animal or a plant. It is actually an animal. So we have to keep that in mind when we're talking about the coral reefs. 600,000 people have estimated to spend over 30 million US dollars annually to watch sharks. And in addition, people will pay to swim with the dolphins, the sharks, stingrays, all around the world. So if we've done those type of activities, we've also led into the support of these type of activities. Oftentimes, with regard to the dolphins, they are caught in what's called the cove out in Japan, where they are brought into a small cove, and the animals are then exported from Japan to places such as SeaWorld, Discovery Cove, and other places. And the animals that are not considered the appropriate animals are often put to death there in the cove after they corral them into this small area. Moving on into shark finning. This infographic shows some statistics about the shark finning industry. Shark finning entails the cutting off of shark's fins while the shark is still alive and dumping the animal back into the sea to die slowly. The fins are used for shark fin soup, an East Asian dish associated with wealth and festivity. In reality, shark fin soup is nothing to celebrate. Between 72 and 73 million sharks are killed annually for shark fin soup. Almost 60% of sharks are threatened by overexploitation. The cost of a bowl of shark fin soup can cost up to $100 of US currency. To recap, the sharks are often thrown back into the oceans after being finned and die in agony from suffocation, blood loss, or predation. If you think about it, a shark is an apex predator, as are humans, and sharks have to keep swimming forward in order to get the oxygen flow. If they're unable to swim forward, then they actually suffocate from not being able to propel themselves through the water. They also play a very vital role in maintaining marine ecosystems. Without them, marine animals and habitats would suffer. Shark finning is unsustainable. Not only do humans decimate the shark populations, but sharks also have low reproductive rates. Many types of sharks are exploited for their fins, including endangered species such as the scalloped hammerhead and the great hammerhead. One thing we must consider, though, is shark products can contain dangerous levels of mercury, and which present a very dangerous public health concern, especially to pregnant females and children, because the levels are so high. Shark fin actually doesn't have any taste, and sharks are hunted for other products such as their meat, leather, and health supplements in addition to their fins. Moving into whaling, as you can see, this infographic provides us some history with whaling to the present. Commercial whaling was banned in 1986. However, Japan, Norway, and Iceland have killed nearly 40,000 large whales since then. Over 100,000 dolphins, small whales, and porpoises are also killed in various countries each year. They are killed using exploding harpoon cannons mounted on the bows of vessels. The whales are pursued and shot with explosives designed to burst when they penetrate into the flesh of the whale. However, not all whales die instantaneously, requiring a second shot from the cannon or sometimes a round of rifle fire. Some whales suffer inhumanely for up to 25 minutes before they eventually die. Small cetaceans may also be killed with harpoons, rifles, nets, or are driven to shore where hooks are inserted into the blowholes and spinal cords are severed while the animals are still alive. Whaling continues despite being illegal in most countries. However, Iceland, Norway, and Japan still actively engage in whaling. Over 1,000 whales are killed each year for their meat and body parts to be sold for commercial gain. Their oil, blubber, and cartilage are also used in pharmaceuticals and health supplements. Whale meat is even used in pet food or served to tourists as a traditional dish. As stated, the whaling for profit was banned in 1986. However, Japan, Iceland, and Norway continue to kill fin, minke, and sei whales every year. All three nations believe they have a right to hunt whales. Japan claims its objective is scientific research, while Norway objects the ban, and Iceland hunts under dubious reservation to the whaling ban. Despite it being illegal in most countries, over 56 species of dolphins, porpoises, and other small whales are killed in over 40 countries across the globe. They're killed for food, their body parts, and used as bait in other fisheries. Arguably, the most notorious bloody hunts take place in Taiji, Japan, and Faroe Islands, where dolphins and small whales are driven into beaches or into coves before being slaughtered. In Taiji, some of the young animals are removed and sold to a life in captivity, and the Taiji hunt and the method of slaughter is so controversial that hunters set up a curtain across the shoreline to hide their activities from the public. And that was what I was talking about earlier with regard to the dolphins being driven into the cove to be exported to other marine type of facilities. Now we're going to talk about some other selected ocean wildlife that are in danger. Now, under the United States Endangered Species Act, there are approximately 2,270 marine species that are considered globally threatened and endangered. And I'm just going to talk about a few of them here. First is the small-toothed sawfish. With its cartilaginous body and elongated scalp, the strange-looking small-toothed sawfish looks to be a crocodile and shark hybrid, but it's actually a type of ray. Found off the coast of Florida, these migratory fish prefer warm tropical waters, and at one point, the small-toothed sawfish could be found throughout the Gulf of Mexico, from Texas to Florida and up to the east coast of North Carolina, according to the United States National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or the NOAA. Why they're in trouble? Populations of the small-toothed sawfish plummeted in the second half of the 20th century due to two primary factors: habitat loss and bycatch. Bycatch is basically when they're out to catch other animals, and sawtooth and other animals are caught in the nets as part of the consequences of this type of fishing. As waterfront construction continued to flourish along Florida's coast, the shallow estuaries where juvenile small-toothed sawfish like to nurse began disappearing. At the same time, fishermen were accidentally catching the fish in their nets, killing them rather than releasing them. The white abalone. You may think of the white abalone as nothing more than a stuffing inside a pretty seashell, but this tasty mollusk is actually a type of plant-eating marine sail, according to the NOAA. One that native people have been eating for thousands of years. Using its muscular orange foot, the white abalone attaches itself to rocks, feeding on algae and drifting kelp. In 2001, These bottom dwellers became the first marine invertebrate listed under the Endangered Species Act. Why they're in trouble? Commercial and recreational overfishing along the California coast in the 1970s is a primary culprit of the white abalone's decline, and due to the creature's peculiar mating habits, they don't become sexually mature until they're 4 to 6 years old. This had a lasting impact on the population. Meanwhile, the mollusks are so plagued with disease called withering syndrome, which can attack the abalone's digestive organs. Next is the green turtle. Encountering a green sea turtle in the wild is a truly breathtaking experience, and one that we may collectively experience less and less without continuing interventions to protect these large herbivores. Green sea turtles are named for the green color of their shells, which derives from the algae and seagrasses that they munch on. Found throughout the world, nesting in over 80 countries and found living in the coastal areas of 140 countries, these turtles have 11 distinct population segments that are considered endangered. Why they're in trouble? Because the green turtle is found in so many locales, it is subject to a number of threats: unintended capture and fishing gear, egg harvesting, nesting habitat degradation, vessel strikes, ocean pollution, warming climate, and diseases. Next is the vaquita. Sadly, this porpoise is the most endangered sea animal on this list, and of all the endangered marine animals, period. In total, there are an estimated 20 vaquitas still living in the wild. These mammals grow to about 4 to 5 feet in length and weigh anywhere from 65 to 120 pounds. The tiny remaining population is only found in the northern portion of the Gulf of California, according to the NOAA. Why they're in trouble? The only known threat to the vaquita is entanglement in fishing gear. Gill nets, vertical panels of netting hung between buoys to create a wall, are the main culprit of their demise. Next, the whale shark. With the largest confirmed specimen coming in at 61.7 feet long, the whale shark is an absolute unit and far the world's largest fish. Despite their size, these creatures are filter feeders, meaning they use their huge mouths to eat plankton and other small fish. Why they're in trouble? The main threats to the whale sharks are intentional fishing, bycatch and nets, and vessel strikes, but there are also other local threats at play. The marine iguana, and we're thinking about fish, but we also want to think about the other animals who are likely to be involved in the seas. Like so many other peculiar creatures, the marine iguana is an endemic species of the Galapagos Islands. Unlike other iguanas, these lizards can dive into the water where they forage algae. Why they're in trouble? El Nino ocean cycles, oil spills, and non-native predators. Kind of has a cute little smile, even though they're having issues with people harming them. Next is the finless porpoise. The finless porpoise is known for being incredibly intelligent and can be found in lakes and rivers in the Southeast and Eastern Asia, notably in the Anganzi. The World Wildlife Federation estimates that there are only about 1,000 to 1,800 finless porpoises left in the wild, with that number continually dwindling. Why they're in trouble? Illegal fishing and habitat degradation. The dugong. Although it is similar in appearance to the manatee, the dugong is a different animal, even though both dugongs and manatees belong to this order Sirenia. Dugongs are friendly, gentle creatures who eat a vegetarian diet and can reach up to 650 pounds as adults. Why they're in trouble? Coastal development, loss of habitat and food, which is a seagrass, and water pollution. But they do look like manatees. The gharial. This garly-looking gharial is a crocodilian, sometimes called gavials. They're easily recognizable thanks to elongated, narrow snouts. They thrive in freshwater systems, And the National Geographic reports that though they were once found all the way from Pakistan to Myanmar, they are now only found in India and Nepal. Why they're in trouble? Human hunting and changes to habitats such as man-made dams have threatened the creatures. Garls need water to survive, and when something like a dam changes the water availability, they may suffer as water becomes less and less accessible. Bluefin tuna, the most valuable fish in the world, is in great danger. According to the Oceana, the International Commission for the Conservation of Atlantic Tunas estimates that as few as 25,000 individual mature bluefin tuna remain. Why they're in trouble? The greatest enemy of the tuna is overfishing. Tuna ranching, when tuna are caught alive and fed for months before being exported, and the loss of prey. Cape penguin. Cape penguins are also called jackass penguins and black-footed penguins due to their call, which sounds like a donkey neighing, and the color of their feet. Obviously, the penguin breeds only in Africa. Why they're in trouble? The loss of nesting sites, oil spills, and food loss due to overfishing are all major threats to these seabirds. Corals. Don't forget, as I mentioned, that coral is a sea animal too, and an important part of the ocean's ecosystem. Coral gives other sea creatures protection plus a place to breed and spawn. Why they're in trouble? This fundamental part of the ocean is incredibly sensitive, and ocean acidification and bottom trawling commercial fishing are major threats to this coral. The gray whale. Among whales, these animals are unique for their dorsal humps instead of fins. These 50-foot whales are also notable for their moans, growls, knocks, and other distinctive vocalizations. While gray whales near Baja California are thought to be friendly, the species is known worldwide for the fierceness with which the mothers defend their calves. Why they're in trouble? Centuries of overfishing have left one population extinct, which is North Atlantic, and one critically endangered, which is the Western North Pacific. The good news is that fishing restrictions have allowed the third population, the Eastern North Pacific, to rebound to the point that it was removed from the endangered species list in 1994. Next is the Hector's dolphin. With just about 7,400 individuals believed to be alive in the coastal waters off of New Zealand, the International Union for Conservation of Nature considers the Hector's dolphin a red list endangered species. Why they're in trouble? Bycatch, pollutants, and boat disturbance. The humphead wrasse. While it's also known as the Neapolitan fish, the humphead wrasse gets its name from the obvious anatomical feature, as you can see the hump over its head there. It's one of the largest coral reef fishes and can be found in reefs throughout the islands of the Pacific and parts of the Indian Ocean. Oh, and it's hermaphroditic, changing from one sex to another over the course of its lifestyle. Because the fish takes a long time to mature, it's also relatively rare to begin with, and it's easy for fishermen to predict where it spawns. Overfishing has been a problem for generations. Loggerhead sea turtles are named for their huge heads, which contains the massive jaw muscles that help them munch on hard-shelled mollusks, according to the NOAA. These endangered sea creatures are the most abundant nesting sea turtles in the United States. Why they're in trouble? Fishing gear is the sea turtle's worst enemy, but the loss of habitat and climate change also play a role in putting these species in danger. We're almost done with the animals, I promise. Manatees. Resembling land mammals as much as any sea creature, the manatee is a gentle giant vegetarian. The largest population of manatee is in Florida, but even there, only fewer than 3,000 individuals are in existence. Why they're in trouble? In addition to passing problems like the 2010 winter freeze that harmed manatees and other sea creatures in Florida, toxic algae, which is caused by human pollution, loss of habitat, and boating collisions all threaten their existence. The Mediterranean monk seal is one of the most endangered mammals in the world, according to the World Wildlife Federation. This seal once ranged from Portugal to Senegal. Today, just 500 remain in its isolated clusters. Why they're in trouble? Hunting, habitat destruction, pollution, depletion of fish stocks, and competition with fishermen all factored into the decline of the Mediterranean monk seal. Other seals, however, may be threatened by global warming as the Arctic and Antarctic habitats are changing rapidly. We have two more animals. The Chinook salmon is the most popular seafood and sport fish in the world, and they are in danger. Wild salmon sales support many communities around the world, but these fish need clean rivers and oceans to survive. Why they're in trouble? The Chinook salmon, also known as king salmon, from Alaska to California are in decline, and pollution, global warming, and bycatch are to blame. And the final animal, the southern sea otter. With the densest fur on the planet, these sea otters survive in cold waters without the blubber layer that insulates other marine mammals. They also need to eat a lot to keep warm. They consume up to a quarter of their body weight every day, while in northern sea otters found off the west coast of the United States from Alaska to Washington have a robust population of roughly 77,000. Fewer than 3,000 southern sea otters live off the coast of California. Why they're in trouble? The biggest threats to sea otters came in the past when the fur trade caused their numbers to drop from more than 1 million to fewer than 2,000. Ongoing threats include oil spills, habitat loss, food limitations, disease, entanglement in fishing gear, and conflict with shellfish fisheries, since the otters like mussels, clams, crabs, and other seafood that humans enjoy as well. Now, this is the end of the animals. So next, we're going to move into selected organizations that help protect our ocean wildlife. And they're not in any particular order. The first is Oceana, which was founded in 2001. It's the largest organization in the world solely devoted to marine conservation. As part of its campaigns, Oceana is involved in efforts to end major sources of ocean pollution, such as oil, mercury, agriculture, and shipping emissions. Next, Ocean Conservancy was founded in 1972 as another leading advocacy group working for the protection of special marine habitats, the restoration of sustainable fisheries, and for reducing the human impact on ocean ecosystems. Next, Project Aware Foundation is an organization working specifically with scuba divers across the globe to protect the underwater environments and is focused on critical issues of shark conservation and marine debris. The nonprofit Monterey Bay Aquarium is also helping to save species like sea otters and white sharks, in giving a voice to urgent ocean issues at local, state, national, and international levels. The Marine Megafauna Foundation was founded in 2003 and focuses specifically on research and conservation for threatened marine megafauna and species such as sharks, rays, marine mammals, and turtles. The Sea Shepherd Conservation Society was founded in 1977 and aims to end the destruction of habitat and slaughter of wildlife in the world's oceans in order to conserve and protect ecosystems and species. They use innovative direct action, non-lethal tactics, including the scuttling and disabeling of whaling vessels, intervening in seal hunts, and throwing bottles of foul-smelling butyric acid onto whaling vessels at sea, among others. The Coral Reef Alliance works with communities around the world to help solve coral reef conservation challenges, although collaboration with fishermen, government leaders, divers, and scientists, and the organization holds holistic conservation programs that improve coral reef health and resilience that are replicated across the globe. The Nature Conservatory was established in 1951 and operates in more than 100 locations and has 100 of such projects globally, some of which include work to create sustainable fisheries while protecting and restoring the fish habitat, mapping the ocean wealth and incorporating and gathered information into decision-making, improving the health of coral reefs, protecting the coastlines, etc. Among the World Wildlife Fund's top priorities in the area of marine conservation are working with the fishing companies, and scientists around the globe to understand and meet sustainability standards, working with organizations around the world toward the goal of expanding the extent of mangrove cover and around the world 20% by the year 2030, and safeguarding the Arctic through advancing climate smart, sustainable development and securing the permanent protection for ecological critical areas. And finally, Greenpeace is a global organization working to stop environmental crimes using nonviolent creative action. The main goals of the group are to protect biodiversity in all of its forms, prevent pollution and abuse of the oceans, Earth's ocean, land, air, and fresh water, and all nuclear threats, and promote peace, global disarmament, and nonviolence. So I know that was a lot of information. So going back to the agenda, how would one incorporate this into a criminal justice class or into other classes? As I mentioned, the animal cruelty class, it focuses on the animals, but we go through the different types of animal cruelty. What is animal cruelty? The different animals that are affected by this. So as you can see, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal 14 would directly relate to that when we're talking about these sea animals and how they are harmed through humans' actions. I also have my students get involved in grassroots level about different types of legislation that is either pending on the federal or state level. They write to the legislators. They also promote awareness through the use of TikTok and other online forums to promote awareness to their colleagues and to society in general about the different laws that are out there. And we also discuss all of these in class. In addition, we talk about animal cruelty for profit. Not only do we talk about the factory farming, as mentioned before, with regard to the cows and the meat in the dairy industry and the poultry industry, we also talk about the overfishing and the shark finning. We talk about the issues with dolphins coming from the Tennessee Cove and other things with animal tourism. We also talk about the different types of crimes that are enacted upon ocean wildlife, whether it's pollution, whether it's overfishing, whether it's gill nets, whatever those types of crimes against the ocean wildlife are being enacted, it's a way to include this in the animal cruelty course. The ocean wildlife in danger, I went through a bunch of them. There are a lot more out there that are in danger because of our human actions, because of the climate changes, etc. And we also talk about the different organizations that protect the ocean wildlife. And these are just a few. There are so many other organizations out there, but these are ones that specifically focus on oceanic wildlife, whereas others focus on more terrestrial animals across the globe. And that is all I have. So hopefully that was the information you were seeking with regard to sustainability in animal cruelty. Yep, you're on mute.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Brad.
Let's see, I know I have some questions, and there may be some of my colleagues here in 255A who do.
Okay.
And some of our folks online.
Okay.
Anyone here want to kick off the questions?
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. I found this very interesting and I suppose relevant to the fact that I'm currently writing a research paper on the overfishing and struggles of the North Atlantic cod.
Wait, let me stop share so I could turn up my volume a little bit so I could hear you probably better. Give me 1 second here.
I shall also move closer.
Okay, I appreciate that.
No problem. So I don't have a question, I just have a comment.
Okay, go ahead.
This talk very relevant to the fact that I'm currently writing a research paper on the struggles of the North Atlantic cod.
Okay.
So I just found this interesting and relevant. I found this very interesting. I took a lot of good notes that I think will help me. And I hope you don't mind if I potentially reach out to you
Sure,
Thank you.
absolutely. Thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
I'm interested, Professor Reyes, about the concept of animal cruelty and whether you find that people are more accustomed to thinking about animal cruelty in terms of animals and domestic animals that we interact with. I think many people are familiar with the SPCA and associate that with cruelty to dogs and cats, pets that we might interact with. Is there a challenge in applying this concept to ocean life in the way that you've been discussing?
Absolutely, because a lot of the laws that we have, at least on the national level, are focused more on companion animals like the dogs and the cats, the animals we find in our home. And because people have that bond with their pets, they often see them as family members, they're more protected, and people will see them as more of living forms. But when you get out into the oceans and you're thinking about the fisheries or the overfishing or the shark finning, people really aren't thinking about that. I, for one, when I went to Bahamas and also when I went to Discovery Cove, before I did any of this research, I swam with the dolphins and I thought it was a breathtaking experience. But now that I know what is going on to get those dolphins there, me personally, I will never do that again because these animals are being harmed. And a lot of people don't really think about that, even though they think they're free swimming with the dolphins in places like Bahamas. But at least where I went in Nassau, they had the dolphins pinned in a certain area so they couldn't free swim and come up to the individuals as they wanted to. They were actually being called by the trainers to bring them up to the individuals to make money off of them. And they weren't really free to come and go as they pleased. So I think that creates a major problem. Also with regard to the whaling, I know that the Sea Shepherd has been working a lot, especially in Iceland and Norway most recently, about the minke whales. And they've been doing a lot of documentation about all these whales that are being, and the fin whales that are being brought up to the shore and slaughtered because they're doing under different auspices. And oftentimes when they go after the ships that are coming from Japan, it'll say research purposes or research on the boat so that they are hiding on the auspice of research. So a lot of people aren't seeing that as animal cruelty as well. It makes it more challenging for sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Looks like Professor Wanko has a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I always have questions, and unfortunately I have two. And I mean, you know, Cassie, I've known you for quite a few years and I've just never had the guts to ask this question, and maybe you've addressed it at the beginning, but my first question is, how do you have the strength to work in this area, right? Because it is something that, I mean, you talk to students about, you know, the animal issue, that's what always gets them with sustainability. So that's my first question, is a personal question about you. The second question is about whaling and like indigenous peoples and their right to continue whaling. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
Sure, absolutely. So with me, I've always loved animals. I actually had an invisible dog when I was growing up instead of an invisible friend. Though these topics are really hard to cover. I've been teaching the course for so long, and I hate to say this, but sometimes when you're used to seeing the information, you don't get numb to it, but you kind of get used to seeing it. Unfortunately, I never want to see it again, but it's important that my students learn about these things and how they can impact them moving forward in their careers in criminal justice, especially how it relates to interpersonal violence and other activities. And the second part with regard to the whaling, during the pandemic, I've learned a lot more about a lot of the First Nations. And in fact, I know they're really hard to see. I actually have orcas that are handmade earrings by a member of a First Nation. With regard to the indigenous individuals who are whaling, they use every part of the animal, and they're more sustainable than these commercial fisheries or these whaling companies that we see across the globe. They are more respectful of the animals, and they have beliefs that they are helping be good stewards of land and all that the land and the ocean and the water provides. So they are being more sustainable than probably anybody else, and quite frankly. So I do give them a lot of respect for that, because they're not just going out there to get the blubber and then tossing the rest of the animal away, etc.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Cheryl.
We are a little past 12:50, and we always like to pause at this point in case anyone online or here in person needs to leave to get to another class. Please feel free to do so. I know I have one more question, but and if you could stay on a little bit to continue the conversation, that would be great. But I want to see if anyone else has a question, since I've posed one already.
I do have another. So it's basically a branch off of one of the questions posed by Professor Blanca. Do you think part of the issue with getting people to, for lack of a better word, care about fish, just due to the fact that it gets more difficult to care about something that's that far displaced from our own experiences? It's like, you think about a dog, a cat, or just another mammal suffering. We're mammals. We understand what they look like when they're suffering. A fish, it doesn't seem to respond in a way we expect. It's almost alien to us.
Yes, and actually research has been done. I believe it was in the UK that definitely show that fish are sentient. Well, there's been a lot of research to show that fish are sentient beings. They can feel pain, and that some fish actually can respond to different activities. So I kind of liken it to when you think about what you're putting into your body, and if you start thinking about where the animal came from, if you're eating animals, then hopefully that brings awareness into sustainable fishing or whatever it is of the animal. But I really agree with you that a lot of people aren't considering fish, and they don't consider poultry as animals at times, because 95 to 97% of animals that are factory farmed are poultry, and they're not given the same protections as cattle or sheep or pork or those type of animals. So we really don't think about the lesser animals as we do our companion animals, or the ones that are more readily seen and not as far away from us. So it is a big challenge, but the more awareness we spread, I'm actually a volunteer with the Humane Society of the United States. The more awareness we spread, the more legislators who are aware of this, even though we know how legislation is made, it depends on who puts the money in their pockets, quite honestly. Hopefully more people can become more aware of what animals are being harmed in this process. And it's one step at a time. The shark finning was a big deal because it took so many years for that to get passed in the United States. It was passed in California years ago, but it finally became a federal level act that was just passed in December. So it's taken a long time for these type of things to occur. I hope that answers your question.
One of my other questions relates to your comment that of the types of animal cruelty that you address in the course you teach, and you refer to overfishing as a form of animal cruelty. Does that suggest that sustainable fishing is not a form of animal cruelty? Is there something different between overfishing and more nuanced levels of fishing?
Well, there are two different types of animal cruelty. There are prohibited types of animal cruelty and permitted types of animal cruelty. So the fishing, even whether it's sustainable or not, would be considered permitted animal cruelty, because if you think about it, a lot of these times these fish are drowning in the nets, or they have hooks placed into them, and they are sentient beings, so they are feeling the pain. They're being killed in one way, not necessarily very quickly. So it is a form of animal cruelty, even though it's permitted under the laws. So regardless of how we do it, it's still considered animal cruelty because they're being harmed in the process. Does that help?
And my last question is related to the climate crisis. The connection between anthropogenic contributions to changes in our climate and changes in the ocean environments there's a fairly direct connection, but is that considered a form of human action that leads to cruelty to creatures that live in our oceans?
Absolutely. It might not be a direct effect, but it could be an indirect effect based on our actions and how in the long term it's affecting the ocean environments and in turn affecting those animals that are living there or surviving off of them and being both aquatic and terrestrial animals as well.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Professor Reyes, for this fascinating presentation. And those who are still online, please join me in thanking Professor Reyes.
Yeah. Thank you all for attending.
All right. Thank you and goodbye.
Goodbye.